I want to take you back into a memory, not a dramatic collapse, not the kind of crisis that makes headlines or earns sympathy, just an ordinary morning that nearly broke me. The alarm rang, and instead of feeling like the day was beginning, I felt like I was already late. My chest was heavy before I even sat up. My mind was racing with unfinished tasks, unspoken conversations, unpaid bills. I grabbed my phone like it could save me, scrolling through emails, messages, notifications. Each one whispered the same lie. You are behind. You are failing. You are not enough. And if you're listening right now and thinking, that's me, that's exactly how my mornings feel. Pause, take one deep breath, and subscribe to this channel, not as a favor to me, but as a lifeline to yourself. Because if my story sounds like your story, then the next chapters might be the turning point you've been waiting for. I used to think anxiety was a dramatic word, reserved for panic attacks and breakdowns. But that's not the whole truth. Anxiety often arrives quietly. It hides behind a neat apartment, a polite smile, a steady job. On the outside, everything looks fine. On the inside, your heart is sprinting a marathon you never signed up for. The cruel part is that nobody sees it. To others, you might look strong, reliable, even admirable. They praise your discipline, your composure, but inside, you're unraveling. Your shoulders ache from invisible weight. Your breaths are shallow. Your thoughts loop endlessly, feeding on every possible failure. Anxiety isn't chaos that comes from outside. It's the storm that builds inside when ordinary life becomes unbearable. I remember one morning on the bus, looking out the window at people sipping coffee, laughing, scrolling through their phones. They looked relaxed, normal, but inside me, it was war. My mind replayed mistakes I thought I'd made, tasks I hadn't finished, conversations I dreaded. Each thought was like a stone in my pocket, pulling me lower and lower. Anxiety lies. It tells you the worst-case scenario is not only possible, but inevitable. It convinces you that you're always behind, already failing, never enough. You can be giving everything you have, and still anxiety whispers. To fight it, I tried working harder, organizing, planning, checking boxes off lists, staying late, waking early, thinking that if I could just get ahead, the storm would settle. But no matter how much I did, anxiety was waiting at the end of every list, ready with new doubts, new what-ifs, new fears. It was like bailing water from a sinking boat with a cup. The harder I worked, the deeper I sank. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you know the exhaustion of lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, heart pounding like a drum, rehearsing disasters that haven't even happened. You tell yourself tomorrow will be different, but deep down, you know tomorrow will start the same way, with that invisible weight pressing down before the day begins. Anxiety feeds on the ordinary, on tiny cracks that alone might not matter, but together bleed your energy dry. The unsent email, the dishes in the sink, the call you didn't return. Small things, but together they grow heavy, unbearable. The worst part is learning to pretend, smiling when you want to cry, saying I'm fine when your body screams otherwise, carrying it all for everyone else while you collapse inside, until one night you whisper into the dark, I can't do this anymore. That whisper isn't weakness, it's honesty, and honesty, even whispered in the dark, is the first seed of change. But here's the part nobody sees. Anxiety doesn't just live in thoughts. It invades your body. It lives in the way your shoulders never drop, even when you're resting. It lives in the shallow breaths that never seem to fill your lungs. It lives in the way your heart races when you're doing nothing but sitting still. I remember sitting at my desk at work, staring at the glow of my computer screen, pretending to focus. But my mind was buzzing with static, like 1,000 bees trapped inside my chest. My palms were damp. My jaw was clenched. I was in fight-or-flight mode, even though there was no danger, just a normal day in a normal office. That's the cruelty of anxiety. It convinces your body you are under attack, when all you're facing is an inbox or a conversation. It floods you with adrenaline and cortisol, sharpening your fear and dulling your joy. And even when the world around you is calm, inside you feel hunted. I tried everything to escape it. Music in my headphones, endless cups of coffee, scrolling through my phone. But nothing silenced the buzzing inside. And the more I tried to distract myself, the louder it became. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in the mirror. A person who looked composed, even polished, hair neat, clothes clean, smile practiced. But behind the eyes, there was exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion no nap could cure. People told me, "You worry too much," or "Just take a break." But they didn't understand that it wasn't a switch I could flip. Anxiety wasn't something I was doing. It was something happening to me, through me, inside me. It was living in my body, rewriting the way I breathed, thought, and moved. And maybe you know what that's like. Maybe you know the frustration of hearing people minimize what feels like drowning. Maybe you've been told to calm down when your whole nervous system was on fire. Anxiety is like living in a house where every window shows another storm. No matter where you look, the horizon is dark. And even when the sun is shining outside, inside, it feels like rain. I want to tell you the truth. I wish I had learned sooner that whisper, "I can't do this anymore," is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the first honest breath you take after years of suffocating. It's the seed planted in darkness that carries the possibility of light. So if you've been waking up already tired, carrying your phone like a lifeline, feeling like life is a list of problems that only grows longer, you are not alone. I've been there. And in the next part, we'll uncover what anxiety really is, not just the word you hear tossed around, but the lived experience that shapes your mind, your body, and your soul. Anxiety. It's a word we throw around casually, almost carelessly. I'm anxious about this meeting. That test is giving me anxiety. But beneath the surface of that word lies something far deeper, something that quietly rewires the way we live. When I finally stopped running from it and decided to understand it, I realized anxiety is not a mood or a fleeting worry. It's a full-body experience. It's a state where your mind, your body, and your emotions stop speaking the same language. Your biology prepares for a danger that isn't there. Your thoughts spiral into a future that hasn't happened, and your spirit feels trapped in a loop you can't escape. I learned that anxiety isn't only in the mind. It is physical, it is chemical, it is social, it is spiritual. It hides in your breath, in your sleep, in your heartbeat, in the way you answer texts or avoid phone calls. I used to think I was just stressed, that maybe I needed to try harder, be tougher, be more disciplined. But no amount of discipline could explain why my heart would suddenly race when I was doing nothing, or why my hands would tremble as I typed a simple email, or why sleep, the most natural act in the world, felt impossible. My body buzzing with invisible electricity while the clock moved past midnight, past 2 a.m., past 4. And here's the truth no one told me. Anxiety is not weakness. It is not a personal flaw. It is the body's alarm system misfiring. It is your brain trying to protect you, even when there is nothing to fight. It is biology, not brokenness. I remember sitting in a doctor's office, my palms sweating as I tried to explain. Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe, like my chest is being crushed. He listened and said, "That's anxiety." I almost laughed. But I wasn't nervous about anything in that moment. I was just existing, and yet my body was in full panic. That's when I understood anxiety doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It arrives uninvited, rearranges your rhythm, and dares you to keep going. Your shoulders tighten until they ache. Your jaw clenches until you don't realize you're grinding your teeth at night. Your breath becomes shallow, like you're sipping air instead of drinking it. And your thoughts, they loop like a broken record, repeating the same doubts. until you can't remember what silence feels like. This is anxiety, when your biology mistakes daily life for danger, when your body prepares for war in the middle of a conversation, when your heart races at the sound of a notification, when your sleep becomes a battlefield instead of a sanctuary. But it's not only physical. Anxiety invades the way you think. It sharpens the negative, magnifies the small, twists the ordinary into catastrophe. A friend doesn't reply fast enough, anxiety whispers. They don't care about you. You make a tiny mistake at work, anxiety shouts. You'll be exposed. Everyone will see you're a fraud. It makes the world unsafe, not because the world is unsafe, but because your perception is filtered through fear. And here's the subtle cruelty. Anxiety often disguises itself as productivity. You check things twice, 3 times. You over-prepare. You rehearse conversations before they happen. From the outside, people admire your dedication. Inside, you're exhausted from fighting battles no one else can see. I learned that anxiety doesn't just show up in isolated moments. It becomes a lifestyle if left unchecked. You start making choices not from desire, but from fear. You say no to opportunities because they might overwhelm you. You isolate yourself because social settings feel threatening. You stop resting because the silence feels too loud. Slowly, anxiety becomes the architect of your life, designing a house of limits instead of freedom. And it's not just personal. Anxiety is also social. It grows in environments where pressure never stops. Workplaces where success is never enough. Relationships where you feel unseen. Cultures that glorify exhaustion as achievement. Anxiety is not just an individual struggle. It is a reflection of the world we've built. A world that celebrates constant motion and punishes rest. When I started seeing this bigger picture, something shifted. I realized I wasn't broken. I was responding to a system that teaches us to measure our worth by our productivity, our likes, our paychecks, our image. Anxiety wasn't just inside me. It was around me, pressing in from every angle. And yet, even as I learned this, my body still carried the storm. My hands still trembled. My nights were still restless. Knowledge didn't erase the experience. It only gave me words to name it. Why does naming matter? Because without a name, you feel alone. You feel like you're the only one drowning in invisible waters. But when you can say it, when you can whisper, this is anxiety. You take the first step toward separating yourself from it. You are not the storm. You are the one standing in the storm. And storms, no matter how fierce, eventually pass. I remember one night, writing in my journal, trying to capture what it felt like. The page filled with metaphors, a buzzing hive inside my chest. 1,000 tabs open in my mind, a weight pressing on my ribs, a shadow that walked 2 steps behind me everywhere I went. None of it was exact, but all of it was true. That's the thing about anxiety. It's hard to explain, but you know it when you feel it. Maybe you've tried to explain it to friends who look at you with confusion, to family who tell you to just relax, to colleagues who say it's all in your head. And maybe you felt the isolation of realizing they don't understand, but I understand, and more importantly, you understand. That's why you're here. That's why this story resonates. Because anxiety is not just something you feel, it's something you carry. It's the invisible backpack weighing you down even on the sunniest day. And once you can name it, once you can say, this is anxiety, this is not me, you take back the smallest piece of control. That naming is the seed. But what happens if we ignore it? If we keep pretending the storm isn't there? That's where the real damage begins. And that's what we'll uncover next. When I think back to the years I spent ignoring my anxiety, I see it now like water seeping through the cracks of a foundation. At first, it seemed harmless, just a drop here, a drop there. But with time, the house began to warp. The walls bowed, the floor creaked, and the structure I thought was solid was quietly being undone from the inside. That's what ignoring anxiety does. It doesn't disappear. it multiplies. It hides in the shadows, eating away at your strength, your peace, your health. I used to believe if I just kept moving, if I stayed busy enough, if I never paused, then the anxiety couldn't catch me. But the truth was, it was catching me anyway. In my headaches that lingered for days, in my stomach that twisted for no reason, in the way my shoulders felt like stone. Anxiety will speak through your body when you refuse to listen with your mind. I remember visiting a friend in the hospital once. She had been ignoring her own anxiety for years. What began as restlessness had turned into high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, constant migraines. The doctors treated her symptoms, but she told me something I'll never forget. I didn't collapse today. I've been collapsing for years, just slowly, quietly, where no one could see. That's the damage anxiety causes when you push it aside. It reshapes you. It teaches your body to live in survival mode. Your nervous system learns to never relax. And when rest becomes impossible, repair becomes impossible too. But the body isn't the only victim. Anxiety eats into relationships. How many arguments are really about fear, not about facts? How many silences come from the weight of what if they leave me? What if they judge me? What if I'm not enough? Anxiety builds walls where there should be bridges. You stop reaching out to friends because you don't want to be a burden. You hold back from partners because vulnerability feels like danger. And slowly, you wake up one day surrounded by people, but feeling utterly alone. Work suffers too. On the surface, anxiety can make you look like the model employee. Punctual, meticulous, always prepared. But beneath that facade is exhaustion, second-guessing, and a fear of mistakes so sharp it kills creativity. Anxiety doesn't just drain your energy, it robs you of your brilliance. The spark that comes when you're free to think, to imagine, to fail and try again. And then there's the damage anxiety does to your identity. The longer you ignore it, the more you confuse yourself with it. You stop saying, I feel anxious, and start saying, I am anxious. It becomes the lens through which you see yourself. And the more you wear that label, the heavier it grows, until you forget that there is a self beneath the storm. For me, the most dangerous damage wasn't the exhaustion or the headaches, or the missed nights of sleep. It was the shrinking of my world. Little by little, anxiety convinced me to live smaller, to avoid risks, to stay quiet, to settle for less. That shrinking felt safe in the moment, but it was actually a slow surrender, a surrender of joy, of growth. And here's the paradox. The world around us often rewards this kind of slow collapse. Workplaces praise the employee who never says no, who burns themselves out silently. Families admire the caretaker who holds everything together, even as they unravel inside. Society calls it strength, but it isn't strength. It's a slow death of the soul. This is why balance matters, because anxiety thrives in imbalance. It thrives when you pour everything into your career and neglect your health. When you give endlessly to others and never refill your own cup. When you live online but forget to touch the grass, the sky, the skin of someone you love. Anxiety is not just a personal flaw, it is a signal. Your life is out of balance. Biologists call it homeostasis. Psychologists call it integration. Spiritually, some call it alignment. Different words for the same truth, and the spirit are not meant to live in separate rooms. They are designed to move together. Ignore one, and the others will collapse in time. I learned this the hard way. I pushed myself to succeed professionally, telling myself I'd make time for family later, for rest later, for joy later, but later never came. Anxiety feasted on that imbalance, growing stronger every day. It wasn't until I began to bring my life back into harmony, eating better, resting more, talking honestly, connecting spiritually, that I realized the storm inside me had been fueled by neglect. Ignoring anxiety is like ignoring smoke in your house. You can tell yourself it's nothing, just a wisp, just a flicker. But if you don't investigate, if you don't act. One day you will wake up surrounded by flames. So let me close this chapter clearly. Anxiety left unattended is never neutral. It reshapes your body, your relationships, your work, and your very sense of self. It convinces you to live small, and it rewards you for it with exhaustion. But balance, real balance, is the antidote. Not balance as perfection, but balance as wholeness. The integration of biology, psychology, social connection, and spirit. When you begin to restore that harmony, anxiety starts to lose its grip. And that brings us to the next part of this journey, not just naming the storm, not just understanding the damage, but learning the practices, the habits, the seeds you can plant today to grow a different kind of field tomorrow. When you've lived with anxiety long enough, you start to believe it is permanent. You think this storm is simply who you are. You carry the weight on your shoulders so long that you forget what it feels like to walk free. But here is the truth I wish someone had whispered into my ear. Anxiety is not your identity. It is a state, and while it may not vanish overnight, it can loosen its grip when you begin planting new seeds in your daily life. Think of it like tending a neglected garden. For years, you've been feeding the weeds thoughts of fear, habits of imbalance, patterns of neglect. The soil is tired, the flowers are choked out, and all you see is overgrowth. But every garden, no matter how tangled, can be restored, not in a single day, not with a single act, but with consistent care, small choices, steady attention. And that's what balance really is. Daily practice of choosing to nourish what makes you whole body, mind, spirit, connection. So let's talk about the practices that matter, not theories, not quick fixes, but real actions you can weave into your life, seeds you can plant today. Your body is the house you live in, and when anxiety has rewired that house into a battlefield, the first step is restoring safety. One of the simplest, most powerful tools you have is your breath. I used to roll my eyes when people told me to just breathe, but science backs this. Deep breathing signals to your nervous system that you are not in danger. Each inhale expands space in your chest. Each exhale whispers to your body, it's safe to rest. Try this once a day. Pause and take 5 breaths so deep they feel almost exaggerated. Inhale until your belly rises. Hold for a count of 3. Exhale slowly, longer than the inhale. Do it again and again. With each round, notice how the storm quiets, even if only a little. Movement matters too. Anxiety lives in tight shoulders, in clenched jaws, in restless legs. Exercise doesn't just build strength, it releases the chemicals that rebalance your mood. You don't need to run marathons. Dance in your kitchen. Walk under the trees. Stretch before bed. What matters is that you remind your body it was made to move, not just to endure. And never underestimate sleep. We treat it like a luxury, but it is a pillar. Without rest, the brain cannot process, cannot reset. Build a ritual around it. Dim the lights. Silence the screens. Let your body know it is safe to surrender. You are not weak for needing rest. You are human. If the body is the foundation, the mind is the script that runs the show. Anxiety loves repetition. It whispers the same what-ifs until they feel like truth. To break the loop, you need new words. Journaling saved me. Not every day, not perfectly, but often enough to see the difference. When I poured my racing thoughts onto paper, they stopped running endless circles in my head. Some days the page was angry. Some days it was messy. Some days it was just lists. But each word written was a seed of release. Another tool, reframe. Anxiety loves absolutes. I'll fail, they'll leave, it's ruined. But when you pause and ask, is this the only possible outcome? You create space. That space is power. Because where anxiety sees only disaster, your mind can learn to see options. And don't underestimate the role of learning. Books, podcasts, therapy, feeding your mind with tools. Instead of fears is like planting flowers where weeds once grew. Anxiety thrives in isolation. It convinces you you're a burden, that no one will understand, that silence is safer. But silence is the soil where anxiety grows strongest. Connection is medicine, not shallow small talk, but real human presence. Sitting with a friend who listens without judgment. Sharing your fears with someone who won't try to fix you, just sit beside you. Even brief moments of connection, a smile at a stranger, a conversation with a neighbor, a meal with family remind your nervous system that you are not alone in the storm. Socializing doesn't mean you need a crowd. It means you need roots. 1 or 2 safe connections can anchor you more than 100 followers online. So if anxiety tempts you to withdraw, resist by reaching out even with a single message. I could use some company today. We often forget the spiritual dimension of anxiety, but without it, balance is incomplete. Spirit isn't necessarily religion. It is anything that connects you to something greater than the endless noise of your own mind. For some, it is prayer. For others, meditation. For others still, it is walking barefoot on the earth, or sitting by the ocean, or listening to music that lifts the heart. What matters is not the form, but the feeling. The sense of being held by something bigger than your fear. When I began meditating, I expected fireworks. Instead, I found silence, restless, uncomfortable silence, but I stayed. And slowly, in that stillness, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years. Space. Space between me and my anxiety. Space to breathe. Space to choose. That space became sacred. Spiritual practices remind you that you are not just a brain, buzzing with what-ifs. You are more. You are presence, awareness, breath. And when you touch that part of yourself, the storm loses its authority. Here's the secret. None of these practices work in isolation. Breath without rest, movement without connection, spirituality without grounding, they fade. The power is in integration, in weaving them together until balance is no longer something you chase, but something you live. Think of it like 4 legs of a table. If one leg is weak, the whole structure wobbles. Strengthen all for body, mind, social, spirit, and suddenly the weight of life feels steadier. And yes, it takes effort. It takes choosing to plant seeds of balance in a world that profits from your imbalance. It means saying no when everything pressures you to say yes. It means resting in a culture that glorifies exhaustion. It means daring to connect when anxiety tells you to isolate. But each choice is a seed, and over time, seeds become fields. So let me leave you with this. Anxiety is not the end of your story. It is the storm before a new season. And balance is not a luxury. It is the soil where your peace can grow. If you've found even a flicker of recognition here, if you've thought, this is me, this is my life on repeat, then breathe with me now and subscribe, not for me, for you, for the version of yourself that deserves to walk lighter, freer, more whole, because the sowing is free, but the harvest is mandatory, and every thought, every habit, every choice is a seed. Today, you have the power to decide what you will plant. Choose balance, choose presence, choose to rise. And though you may not feel it yet, know this: you are not alone in the storm, and the field ahead is waiting.